depending on the witnesses.
Being so gracious. Being so gracious. Okay. Aviation and airports, are you ready?
Yes.
Terrific. Senator Patrick.
So, thank you, Chair. Just following on from my previous question, once again, government has allocated about $50 million to, sorry, it might be $100 million for regional airports to pay for security screening equipment, which is being imposed upon regional communities by a new requirement from Home Affairs. This committee heard evidence in its inquiry last year that the ongoing cost of security, somewhere between $560 and $730 million, $1,000 per annum. Typically, they're your numbers in your submission or in Home Affairs submission to the inquiry. Just read out to you something from Qantas at the hearing we had in Darwin. Just talking about these security costs. A very good example is South Australia, where we have two Q300s based in Adelaide, operating to Port Lincoln, Whyalla and Kangaroo Island. All three markets would then be subject to security costs, we estimate, of between $700,000 to $1 million a year of ongoing operating cost. And we've been very clear with government that would put in jeopardy those services entirely. So, and we discovered that there was no analysis that was done. The requirement was just made by bureaucrats in Canberra, completely isolated from the realities and difficulties of regional communities being able to afford this. And in answer to a question I put at the last estimates, so thankfully someone's listening. In light of the issues raised, the department will work with the Department of Home Affairs and Industry to conduct up to 6 case studies to assess the financial impacts of the enhanced aviation security requirement on regional airports and, where possible, the flow-on impacts to local communities. The airports from across a number of states will be selected based on varying passenger and flight departure profiles. So I'd like to know where that analysis is up to.
Yes, Senator. The analysis is well progressed. We've looked at the six case study airports: so Rockhampton, Geraldton, Wagga Wagga, Whyalla, Longreach and Kangaroo Island. At the highest level, we've been talking to both Home Affairs and the operators of those airports, and I might ask Mr McRandall to provide a bit more detail.
Airlines?
Yeah, engaging with industry as well. Yeah.
So thanks, Senator. The studies have been largely developed from the information that we have available. We've spoken to the relevant airport operators to get an understanding of their cost base. We are, as a next step, sharing that information with the Department of Home Affairs for any comment at this stage, and then we'll speak with the airlines as a next stage in the consultation process. So we want to get an opportunity to engage with all the elements of the aviation sector that affect those airports, the airlines, the airports, and Home Affairs. You asked at the beginning of mentioned at the beginning of your question the cost of that program. It's $50.1 million that the Department of Home Affairs is administering, and that's separate from the $100 million that the government has announced for a regional airport program, which is available from this Thursday, but I'll keep that one separate for the moment. $50.1 million is the Home Affairs.
That's not for security, is that correct?
It's for non-security related development of airports.
So we still have the same problem. The capital costs of the security equipment are covered, but at this stage the operating costs are not.
You're correct. The operating costs are going to be the big driver. It's going to be more material for those airports that don't have security screening services at the moment, so they'll be starting those services from scratch. Other airports like Rockhampton, which already run security screening, will have an additional cost, we think, from our estimates, and we're just checking those with the airports and the airlines to get some advice on that. They'll have a marginal cost, but those airports that haven't previously had the security screening will have a bigger cost to deal with, and I guess the element we're looking at is over what number of passengers could those costs be spread, what sort of services are currently operating into those airports.
Okay, and in respect of that, there's another difficulty in that Rex operates aircraft that are less than 40 seats, so there is no requirement to screen Rex aircraft. Qantas operate the Q300s and 400s with more than 40 seats, so there would be a lawful requirement for them to conduct screening. That creates a problem at a place like Whyalla, and no doubt the other places you've mentioned where Rex will simply say, we don't want to bear that cost. That will kill our margins if you impose that upon us. And then the flip side to that is that Qantas will then say, we have to bear all of the cost for the security services for our one service. That's why both of these airlines are reluctant and saying words like, it may put us out of operation in those regional centres. So are you factoring in the 40-seat differentiation and how that's going to be addressed?
Senator, we are having regard for the way that the Home Affairs regulations operate. So that's around those splits about aircraft size. So from the arithmetic that we're doing in this exercise, it'll be clear what those costs would be based on the strict requirement around the regulations, as well as what you could potentially charge, or what you might have to charge if the total passenger mix was available.
And each of those 6 case studies will be made public, I presume, and subject to public scrutiny?
Senator, we'll provide those to the committee once we've completed those, and we think that's in the coming weeks rather than any longer, so as soon as possible, and it will be available for the committee. Okay,
and just finally, I recall that the funding is allocated for the procurement of the security equipment. There was a grant round that was conducted. I presume that's been funded, but the instrument that actually legally permits you to impose this requirement on regional airports has not been brought to the Parliament yet. So it's a really out of order step, because you're making the presumption the Parliament will in fact approve the security requirement, because I reckon I'll have a few more nationals crossing the floor.
Sorry, Senator, just to be clear, that's a matter for the Home Affairs portfolio.
Sure.
We're just explaining to you what we're doing in response to the question that was
I accept that
raised.
as a proposition. But that is very, very alarming for those that haven't been watching that. That'll kill off regional airlines. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Patrick.